We're here this morning to discuss another national tragedy and to reflect on the loss of 17 innocent lives. The February 14th, 2018 attack on Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School at Parkland, Florida, was an evil act committed by a troubled young man. He will account for what he has done in the court of law. But today, we will also call the government to account for its role or absence of role in this tragedy. Federal, state, and local officials each received tips about the alarming behavior of the Parkland shooter. Their failure to act allowed the Parkland shooter to obtain and continue to possess firearms. In the wake of the Parkland attack, this committee has an obligation to find out what happened. We must hold our government to account for its failures and to make sure plans are in place to avoid future tragedies. But we must rally around consensus, evidence-based solutions that will protect our nation's most valuable resource, its young, from violent attacks. I hope that political opportunists will not interject extreme agenda into this debate. That might be good for the party politics of both parties and the fundraising for midterms, but it's not good for America and the safety of our citizens. I saw this happen after Newtown. After Newtown, I worked with my colleague, Senator Cruz, to introduce legislation that would have improved reporting to the NICS background check system, provided grants to support school safety measures and programs, supported the prosecutions of dangerous people who lied to try to buy firearms, and authorized a government study to solve the problem of mass shootings. That law could have helped prevent tragedies like Sutherland Springs and Parkland shooting. A majority of the Senate supported our bill on a bipartisan basis. Tragically, it was held hostage by partisan politics and did not pass. Senator Cruz and I reintroduced the Protecting Community and Preserve the Second Amendment Act of 2018 last week. In addition, I've worked with Senator Hatch here, former chairman of this committee, and on my right, to draft the Stop School Violence Act, which will provide needed funding to increase school safety. That bill now has co-sponsorship, bipartisan, 36 senators. I'm also co-sponsor of Senator Cornyn's Fix NICS bill, which is supported by 68 senators. I also support the President's effort to regulate bump stocks, if necessary, to pass a bill to get it done. And today, I want to announce that I will be introducing the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School Memorial Act of 2018. This bill will provide funding to support Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center's efforts to conduct cutting-edge research into the prevention of school violence. And it will also enable the National Threat Assessment Center to train more of our nation's schools in how to conduct threat assessment and early intervention. The Secret Service has already trained 93,000 government officials, school administrators, teachers, and law enforcement officials in implementing effective threat assessment programs. This training enables local communities to prevent dangerous and unstable individuals like the Parkland shooter from carrying out intended attacks. The bill will enable the National Threat Assessment Center to share its own proven techniques and research with more of our nation's school systems. It is a fitting memory to the victims and survivors of Parkland attack and will help prevent future violence. I invite all of my colleagues on this committee and elsewhere to support this bill as a co-sponsor. I think it's clear that we have a number of bills that the Senate can come together to support that can reduce school violence and mass shootings. Some of this committee have said that we're not taking action, that we're not holding hearings and marking up bills on this issue. This is the second hearing on mass shootings and related legislation that we've had in 4 months. That's more hearings than the last chairman held on this issue at this point in that tenure, despite the DC sniper attacks, the Virginia Tech shootings, and other attacks during that time period. As for markups, I've had discussions with Senate leadership and members of this committee on both sides of the aisle on how we can enact legislation that will help prevent violent attacks. Often, as my Democratic colleagues well know, legislation on controversial issues, such as gun issues, are of concern to the entire Senate. It is common for bills on these issues to bypass committee and to be brought straight to the Senate floor. That was the strategy that the Democrats used when they brought up Senator Manchin and Senator Toomey's bill on universal background checks when they were in the majority. That bill went straight to the floor without hearing or markup, where it was debated by the full Senate. It's possible that similar approach may be used now as the Senate works together to consider what should be done about school safety and preventing mass violence. In the meantime, we're holding this hearing, which I believe is a great opportunity for the entire Senate and indeed the country. I hope today's hearing can shed light on what government can do better to prevent future attacks. Since the Parkland shooting, I instructed my staff to investigate what went wrong, so we had officials from the FBI immediately briefed the committee's majority and minority staff. We also heard from representatives from Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube. These companies outlined their efforts to work closely with law enforcement and to quickly respond to inquiries in the Parkland case and similar cases. The briefings to the committee, Google and Facebook officials noted that the FBI didn't reach out to them to help identify and locate the shooter. If the FBI had done so, both companies said that they would have been able to provide detailed information, including IP addresses. That information likely would have provided the FBI with physical address. They also highlighted their efforts to use technology and user feedback to identify alarming contents that should be referred to law enforcement for further investigation. So I want to thank those companies for their willingness to meet and discuss these very important issues and for sending their representative to the hearing today. I also want to thank Ryan Petty, the father of Elena Petty, who was a victim of the Parkland shooting, and Catherine Pizzata, a language arts teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, for being with us today. We mourn the loss of that community and that school and look forward to your testimony and your perspective on this issue. The committee also invited Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel to testify. He declined. I've seen that sheriff all over television discussing the shooting, so it's disappointing that he has refused to speak to the country through his testimony before this committee. Michael Carroll, Secretary of Florida's Department of School and Families, was also invited. His department investigated and interviewed the shooter before the attack and then appears to have dropped the ball. He too has refused to appear, even though Governor Scott didn't oppose his attendance. By thumbing their noses at Congress, Sheriff Israel and Secretary Kerr have let the American people down and also the citizens of Florida that they serve. As we will discuss during the hearing, Broward County Sheriff and Department of Child and Families are integral to the Parkland fact pattern. And that fact pattern is, of course, as you all know, very, very disturbing. In September 2017, the shooter posted a comment on a YouTube video that read, quote, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter," end of quote. The creator of the video flagged the comment and reported it to the FBI. The September 2017 tip was routed to the FBI's West Virginia call center. According to what the FBI has told the committee, the responsible FBI agents did not believe they had enough information to identify the shooter who made the YouTube post. The FBI then closed the case. Then on January the 5th this year, the FBI received a call from a woman who knew the shooter well. She described a troubled young man who posted disturbing statements and pictures of mutilated animals and guns on social media. The caller described the shooter as suicidal and with homicidal ideas. The caller also provided the FBI with the usernames to 4 of his social media accounts. In one account, he wrote, quote, "I want to kill people," end of quote. The caller also explicitly mentioned her concern that he may try to get into a school and, quote, "shoot the place up," end of quote. The call taker concluded that there was no imminent threat because the tip did not provide a target date and a target location. If the FBI had followed up on that tip, it would most likely have sent agents to interview the shooter. Either way, it appears that the FBI did not communicate with local law enforcement. In addition to the FBI, the state of Florida has a tremendous responsibility as well. On September 28, 2016, Florida's Department of Children and Families opened an investigation into the shooter. At that investigation, that Department of Child and Families concluded that he is, quote, "vulnerable adult due to mental illness," end of quote. That department's investigation also mentioned that a mobile crisis unit was deployed at Henderson Health and determined that the shooter wasn't a risk to himself or others. On November the 12th, 2016, that department closed the investigation. It appears, that local officials in Florida, including the Broward County Sheriff, may not have taken the necessary steps to involuntarily commit. If he had been involuntarily committed to the mental institution for treatment, he would have been entered into the NICS system and prohibited from purchasing firearms. At all levels, law enforcement must explain what went wrong, why it went wrong, and what steps it's taken to make sure that these failures never happen again. And we must determine the best evidence-based approach to improving school safety.